Hey there and welcome. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how we can actually download the software that we need to start writing Python code. So I'm going to recommend to you to actually get PyCharm, which is my favorite IDE that I've worked with, but other popular ones are Visual Studio Code. And then there's also one that you can find if you go to python.org. You'll also be able to download a Python IDE from here. Personally, I really prefer the one from JetBrains. It has a lot of really cool features that are really nice to just use later on. It's also the one that I'm going to be using throughout this whole course. So yeah, I would generally recommend this one. But again, the python.org one is a very standard one, a very basic one. Visual Studio Code is also a very popular one. But PyCharm is a great option. So to get that, we're going to go to jetbrains.com. And from here, we're going to click on Developer Tools. We're going to click on PyCharm. Now, there are two versions of PyCharm available. So we can click on Download here. One of them is the professional version, and then the other one is the Community Edition. So the professional version is a paid license, and the community one is the free one. So obviously, we're going to go with the Community Edition. But the professional version does have a lot of really nice things, and if you want to, you can see there's a free trial. You can try that out. Your company may or may also not have a JetBrains license, so it's possible that you'll be able to get the professional PyCharm version using that license. So if you have that option, I would highly recommend it. But if not, the Community Edition is going to do great too. So we're just going to hit download here. Now, of course, if I'm currently on a Mac, but if you're on Windows or Linux, it'll probably pop up to whichever the right one is. But yeah, you're just going to click on the right one, just hit download, and that's going to start the actual downloading of the installable that you need. And once you have that, you're just going to walk through the setup with it. I already, of course, have it installed. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do once you finish that setup, once you've just gone through those basic installation steps, open up the executable, open up the .dmg file that we have here, just click next, and installed it. So we're going to go, or I'm going to go to my I'm going to pull up my Finder here, and I'm going to go to the documents. Now, you don't have to do this in the documents. You can do this literally anywhere. You can also do it on the desktop if you want. I put a lot of stuff actually on my desktop. So when I have projects, I usually have one big folder for whatever, that main overarching theme is that I'm working on. And then I'll have smaller subfolders in there and just kind of layers and layers and layers of folders. But yeah, I'm going to do this one in the document, but again, you don't have to do it in the documents. This is just where I'm going to create it. You can totally create it on the desktop if you want, or you can even do it in the downloads. I would recommend keeping that clear because I usually clear my downloads quite regularly. So I'm just going to create a new folder here. That's going to be our first Python project. And we're just going to have it here, just empty for now. So then I'm going to open up PyCharm, and you can see a project that I've been working on recently, building a small Reddit clone, but we're not going to get into that right now. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go File, we're going to click on Open, and then we're going to navigate to that folder, wherever we created it. In my case, it's going to be the documents. And I'm going to click on the folder, which is currently empty. I'm just going to click Open. I'm just going to say this window. And then we're going to open then it's going to open the folder for us, and basically now we can start working in here. In case you don't have this view on the side here, you can actually go into View in the top, and then you can go into Tool Windows. And then here, if you click on Project, you can see we can open or close it. Well, we can close it by clicking the minimize. If we go into View and Tool Windows and Project, that will pop right back up. In this case, it actually kind of created a default file for us that we can start using, but I'm actually going to clear all of this because we're going to, start writing everything ourselves. But now we have a nice place where we can actually start coding it. And what's really nice about this is that we have this project structure, which as time goes on, we're actually going to be adding more files. We can add folders, and we'll be able to have the overview with everything. And actually, as you already saw, kind of in the sneak peek of my previous code that I've been working on, we're also able to have a lot of different windows open. And we also have some cool access, for example, to the terminal readily down here. So we're going to be making use of all of these things, obviously going through everything step by step. And this is actually just going to be our kind of like all-in-one development software. We can write all of our code, we can run it, we can, evaluate it and test it, and basically, just do all of the cool stuff. So yeah, that's kind of it for downloading this. Just make sure that you get to this step where you have PyCharm open and you have your folder open, and if it didn't create an empty file for you, no worries. So we can just delete this, and I'm just going to right click on my folder here. I'm going to click new. I'm just going to have a file. You can do a Python file, but I'm just going to click new file, and then I can call this main.py. The py will indicate that this is a Python file. So when we're writing Python code, basically we have all these options for like highlighting and code completion. So if you're writing Python scripts, I recommend that you add this .py extension, because it will make everything much easier to do with your development environment. Basically everything will kind of be detected for you. We don't need to call it main. You could really call it whatever you wanted. We could call it like project 1, or you could call it our first program, or whatever. I'm just going to keep it simple, and we'll just call it main.py. And yeah, just make sure you get to the stage where you have your folder open in PyCharm and you've now created a file, and then this is where we're actually going to start writing our code in. All right, so now that we have a place to code in and we have a version of Python that we can use that's relatively up to date, let's go ahead and write and run our first piece of code. Now we're going to go back and do PyCharm here, and we're just going to go into our main.py file. And in case this is not open, just double click it and it will open up. And we're just going to do, the basics of basically any initial programming language when you're learning it, which is going to be printing out hello world in our console here. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in the keyword print, and you'll notice that it gets color coded because my editor here recognizes that this is a Python keyword, and we'll talk about, or you'll see actually in a second what this does. And now I want to type in what it needs to print out. Unfortunately, I can't just type in hello world like this, because these are actually, or in this case, we'd be referencing variables, and we'll learn about variables later on, but really these words themselves aren't defined. And again, you'll see what this means later on, but if we want to have either in a word or in programming we actually call it a string, we need to put quotation marks around it. Now in Python, it doesn't matter if we use single quotation marks, so you can see if I highlight it, it will put quotation marks around it, but of course I could have also just, if I undo this here, I could put the quotation marks beforehand and I can put them afterhand. It doesn't matter if we have single quotation marks or double quotation marks, and we'll learn about strings in a second a little bit more in detail too. The most important thing is just that we have quotation marks around them. In some other programming languages, the single and the double quotation marks have different meanings. In Python, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that you're consistent. If you use single quotation marks for strings, make sure you always use single quotation marks. If you use double, just make sure you always use double. Just be consistent. So now we have this string here is what it's called, but really it's just, it's 2 words, it's a sentence, it's just a sequence of characters. And this is the value, it contains the value of hello world. And so now we have the most basic Python program, which we'll see in a second is just going to print out this value in here in our console when we run it. So how can we run it? We're going to go to our terminal, and I'm going to type in here Python 3.9. Just going to make sure we're going to use the Python 3.9 version that we just installed. And then I'm going to reference this, and if you use tab, it should actually autocomplete main.py. If it doesn't autocomplete, just continue typing a little bit longer until you have enough of the file name there, because it will autocomplete if it's basically the only one that matches that pattern. So in this case, if we type Python 3.9 into our terminal here, and then we put in here the name of the file that we want to run afterwards, and we hit enter, then it's going to run it for us. And you can see what happened is we have this hello world printed out. So we've just run our first program. Congratulations. You can see Well, Python, as you can see already, is a very, very user-friendly language because all that we needed to do to write our first program was just write one single line of code. In most other programming languages, you need a bunch of other stuff around it to kind of have the base skeletal structure there so that you can then run it. But in Python, all we need is that one single line. And although, of course, it's not doing much right now, we can see we've already been able to run and do something. All that we've done right now, though, is just print this out in our console. But we were able to print out the sentence, and this very short sentence, and you'll notice also the quotation marks are no longer there. And that's again because this value in here is a string and the contents inside are the value contained inside that string. But again, don't worry about that because we will have a separate lessons on strings in just a second. But again, congratulations on running your first program. So let's go ahead and learn some more new things with Python.